everybody, Reagan and Ryan here. We're going through your labs. We're getting you ready for your next visit. Your next visit is going to be one of the most impactful visits because this is the visit that we're going to cover your glamour test. Remember that little hat we gave you, and a lot of you took this kit home with you and we said, we're going to get the scoop on your poop. Well, Ryan and I today, we're going to just give you an outline of what that looks like, the importance of it. But if you look in any medical tradition, you look 3,000 years old, the books Ryan and I were studying, the Neijing, it talks about the digestive system being the central feature of healing. And so what's going to happen on this visit is you're going to meet with one of our providers, and they're going to explain to you what bacterial overgrowths you may have, if there's yeast, if there's parasites. They'll look at a bunch of different factors, which Ryan will go over in just a minute. But this will give you a great overview, this video here, so that when you come into the visit, you're ready to go and you're ready to get some information. So Ryan, what should they expect? Let's go through the lab with us.
So here's the results for your Genova labs. What we're going to see here, there's different categories on the front that show certain infections that may have showed up in the stool, different markers for inflammation that can show up in the GI system, and insufficiency, any insufficiencies that show up in the GI. So for this, you can have too many fats in the body, too many fats showing up in the stool. Any imbalances can also show up here. So we've got high levels of bacteria that can show up, low levels of amino acids that can show up, short chain fatty acids or butyrate. So these are all things that we want good balance of in the GI, so we know that there's proper digestion happening. Also on the bottom there's a diversity association. So you've got a graph here that shows you high microbiome diversity. That's what we want, so that's like in an environment, in a city, we want a good level of law enforcement, firefighters, ambulatory, government. We don't want any of those to be too much in power, because then one can be overpowering the other. We also don't want to be too low of any of them, because if there's too many fires, we don't have the right amount of firemen showing up, that's a problem too. So it's the same kind of metaphor for the gut. So this is the diversity of the bacteria that we see. Over here is a relative abundance profile. So you've got a patient results and then healthy colon, and they show up side by side. So we can see if there's certain levels of bacteria that we know cause overgrowth of yeast, or if we know they cause people to put on weight too much, then we know that those are things that we want to knock down a little bit, adjust the food profile, and see how we can treat that patient the best. We switch this over here. This is a big readout of all the different types of bacteria. I'm not going to go through this with you, but we will take your personal lab results and mark it up against the different products we use. A lot of probiotics have all these different levels of bacteria that we can then add in, so we know if we have certain low levels, then we can choose the right products. We can also choose the right foods that we know are going to help those levels come up. And if we have too many high levels, we know which bacteria to add in to help bounce those out. It's kind of like overpopulating so that we can push some bad ones out.
Yeah, a lot of people will take probiotics and they will get worse. We've had countless patients come in like, I tried probiotics, it made me worse, and it's because they're not looking at a profile when it comes to stool. And if you look at medicine of the future, it's getting better every year, every day actually, where we can isolate the exact probiotic that your body needs to help get a great health in your gut.
Again, there's more information about the gastrointestinal microbiome, additional bacteria that may have showed up. There's a mycology section, so it shows if there's any fungal matter, any spores that show up that we don't want in the gut too. This person here had no microscopic exam results, so no parasites found. That's great. What this will do is this will show parasites. It'll also show different tests for these specific Giardia, EHIST, Cryptosporidium. I need to say that.
Cryptosporidium.
Cryptosporidium, sorry.
You do not want Cryptosporidium.
Yeah, these are all negative, so we know if those are negative, that's a good thing. You don't have those things in your stool. The last part here shows bacterial sensitivity. So if there are any bacteria that show up it can give us a good idea of natural agents that are used to start killing that bacteria. So for here we've got ampicillin and cephalothin, sorry, those things all showed up in the red. So what it does, it shows here which of these natural products we can use to help kick that bacteria out. Uva ursi is a product that's found in the woods, you know, but people synthesize into tincture form or capsule form. It's in GI Synergy, one of the products we use here. Oregano, berberine, these are all chemicals and products that we know are inside of plants that are isolated for this specific use.
Great. So now we're going to talk about diagnostics, because some of you, there's two different tests. They're both equally efficient, equally impactful, but we just use different labs based on what we need to run for you. So now we'll cover diagnostics.
And we're going to go through multiple different markers, multiple different physical findings that show us how to treat you. One of the first things that shows up here is a stool culture for yeast in this test here. So this one, luckily for them, no yeast was isolated in this stool sample. We want to look at both symptoms that you may have and correlate them to this test to see how we want to treat and what things are showing up. But for them here, luckily, no yeast. That's nice to find. Chymotrypsin in the stool is a marker enzyme for pancreatic enzyme output. So the pancreas and the stomach work together with the liver to communicate which enzymes to excrete when certain foods show up in the body. So if that communication system is broken, you're not going to have the right enzymatic output to then properly digest food before it reaches the small intestine and the large intestine. So we want to see how this enzyme marker is how it's going. And this one's the output's a little low. So there we'd probably add in some digestive enzymes, maybe some Zypan. It's a product we use with some betaine HCl, and those are going to help break the foods down. You take that before your meals, so then it gives the body a little bit of an assist, so that later on down the line in the small intestine, large intestine, it's easier for those organs to digest the food. Next thing we see here is occult blood. So it's actually looking and seeing if we found any blood in the stool sample. That's not a good thing, right? So we know that's not where we want blood. We want blood in the vessels, not in the stool. That could be a couple of different reasons. It could be from hemorrhoids, so we would ask you maybe when was the last time you got a colonoscopy. It could be from further up in the stool, in the GI. We don't know just from this test, but we can further investigate through questioning. This one was negative, good for them. Looks at the pH of the stool. So generally this is in good range, in good balance, but if there's a high acidity or a really alkaline environment, not great for the stool environment. So we want everything to be optimal for good digestion. The next few things here, they're testing for food IgA. IgA is an immunoglobulin response that is the first level of immunity that the body kicks up when it sees something it needs to fight. We don't want our body to fight food, but as we know, sometimes it does. Everyone's heard of celiac disease. That's a resistance to gluten. So that's when the body attacked the gluten proteins. So what this does here, it shows milk, soy, and egg. Those are three foods that are tested on here. They've all come up positive for this test. So that's somewhere we want to say, okay, those are foods that your body has a fight response to, an immune response to. So we want to avoid those foods for future consumption. The next section here shows what levels of gram-positive, gram-negative bacteria you've got in your stool. So those are two different types of bacteria that we want an abundance of. And the whole thing with the stool is you want a healthy environment. It's just like the city you live in. You want good people on the street. You want protective environment around you. You want people to show up when there's danger, when there's a fire, when there's an accident. You want the right things to show up. In an imbalanced society or an imbalanced GI system, the right things aren't big enough, they're not abundant enough to show up. We don't have enough firemen, we don't have enough ambulance. That's sometimes a problem, so it's the same with the gut. I like to think of it that way. So we'll get a readout here of which ones are high that we don't want to be high. We'll get a readout of which ones are low that we want to kick up some more, and then from there we can give you the right food recommendations, herbal and supplemental regimes to get that balance.
Yeah, one thing just to warn you, you're going to get this whole process. It's called the 5 R's. Mm-hmm. So that's where we're going to remove what's causing issues. We're going to be re-inoculating, repopulating, rebalancing your gut. and then you're going to get a restoration of complete gut function that way. So there's a flow we'll take you through based on what your labs show.
Somewhere in the middle, we need to repair everything too. That was the one repair. Yeah, repair is the R that was forgotten there. Second page here. More information about the bacteria that was shown. We look for different types of toxins that are sometimes high in the stool that can cause diarrhea, that can cause acid reflux. We look for H. pylori in here. We look for C. diff. These are things that are naturally occurring in our environment. But if they get out of balance and they're too high, that's when we start to see symptoms. So that's when we'll treat that symptomatically. Again here, you send in another saliva, collection with your stool. So this test specifically for H. pylori in the saliva. This one was negative. Good for them. Also test for an IgA response in the stool itself. So the immune system is woven throughout the GI. You've got the GALT, it's the gut-associated lymphatic tissue. That is all woven as connective tissue and living tissue in between the small intestine and large intestine. So your immune system starts here in your gut. If there's an immune response in the large intestine or small intestine, it's immediately communicated to the rest of your body through the GALT. And if there's a high IgA here in the stool, then we know there's systemic inflammation. Your body's constantly fighting something that it shouldn't be fighting. So that's how we treat appropriately. The lysosomes in the stool. So elevated fecal lysosome can indicate gastrointestinal inflammation. This one's not inflamed. Good for them. So again, sometimes we get results that are really steady and really clear, and we don't have to do a lot of work. But a lot of times we'll see all these markers way up high, maybe 3-4 times the amount of normal, and that's when we know, okay, this is our key thing. We need to get in there and work on it. Last thing on this test here is the anti-chymotrypsin, and this is something that's in the stool that also is a marker for gastrointestinal inflammation. So between these 3 markers, we can see how bad the level of inflammation is between the small intestine and the large intestine, and treat appropriately.
Great. So just an overview of that. This test is, once again, your digestive system starts the moment you start chewing food. That's the very first entrance into your digestive pathway, and we're looking at everything A to Z in your whole digestive profile. So it's going to be a great visit. And the thing about this test is when you get your recommendations, just some general gut health guidelines, is you're going to want to create diversity. So try to eat something fermented every day, unless you hear otherwise. Sometimes if you have yeast overgrowth, that can exacerbate it. But in general, get some fermented foods. You want to make sure you're eating resistant starch. What are some of your favorite resistant starches, Ryan?
Plantains, actually.
Those are good.
Not bananas, but plantains. So green plantains have a lot of non-resistant starch that won't exacerbate problems in the gut. Yeah,
plantains. We like sweet potatoes. Do some white rice. There's some really good things that you want to do. Use your starches more at night. The other thing for your gut, make sure you're getting a pound of vegetables in a day. All of that inulin and the food that your bacteria feed on is going to be found in the fibrous parts of those plants. So lots of vegetables. Chew your food. Take our mindful eating class. That will give you some great insights. And then make sure that you're not eating meats that have antibiotics in them. And come to us if you get a cold before you take an antibiotic, because
please.
We can save you a lot of turmoil. I mean, just one dose of antibiotics can completely destroy your gut bacteria, your flora is what it's called, for up to a year. So come and try some other things out first. We're going to probably mention different pre and probiotics for you, so that will be part of this lab result. But really look forward to having you come to this visit, and we hope you come with your game face on and ready to learn.